Hi guys, Kelsey here, doing my second review on a highly recommended film to me by my friends, who know me as a passionate horror addict. So for those of you who are like me, hope you guys stick around to hear my quick recap and review of Hereditary, a film released back in 2018 by American filmmaker Ari Aster, who is also famously known for directing Midsommar last year. So if you've got no time to watch, but want to know what the movie is all about, and my take on whether this film is worth watching or skipping, this is the perfect video for you. Hereditary is an unsettling horror film that takes inspiration from the horror cult classic Rosemary's Baby, and reminds me of Skeleton Key, where the scare factor is not so much brought upon by the typical scare tactics of ghosts popping out of nowhere that a lot of horror films do. Rather, its horror is brought upon by the idea of evil acting without us knowing, the idea that something you thought to be good is actually evil. What makes Hereditary so disturbing is seeing our main character Annie unknowingly fall victim to a cult ritual with her own doing. The perfect saying for her situation is digging her own grave without her knowing it. Hereditary starts off clearly ticking all the boxes of a horror film. From the get-go, the film lets us know that something dark and sinister is about to take place. Unlike most horror movies where setting and build-up takes majority of the first part of the film, Hereditary doesn't linger, but rather welcomes us with the death of Annie's mother, Ellen Lay, at the very first shot. From the onset, the film already tells us that they don't have the best relationship. This is subtly shown when Annie gives her eulogy to a crowd she barely knew, calling them strange new faces. She goes on by describing her grandmother as a very private person with private friends, rituals, and anxieties. Ellen's death impacts Annie's family all in different ways. Her husband Steve takes it in but rarely complains, nor shows any vulnerabilities throughout the film. He acts as the family's stability to Annie's mercurial character. Peter, her oldest son, acts a typical teenager, and her daughter Charlie has always acted strange from the moment the film began. Annie takes it the hardest and is conflicted with guilt, grief, and a feeling of responsibility, so much so that she starts lying to her husband by saying that she is going to the movies when she is really going to a grief group support. She feels the need to be strong and resorts to hiding her pain, and just when we think all will be okay and that this family will pull through, another misfortune happens. Like most tragedies, we try to find a new kind of normal. In this case, Peter goes to a party trying to be a normal teenager, and Annie forces him to bring Charlie with him. They go to the party together until Charlie gets a nut allergy that forces Peter to drive and rush to the hospital. The scene that unfolds after is a rush of adrenaline, with Peter driving at full speed, Charlie rolling down the window fighting for some air to breathe, Peter swerving to avoid a dead animal in the middle of the road, then bam! Charlie's head hits a post on the street and dies. Charlie's death is unexpected, and it is almost as if we are feeling the same shock as Peter, who just wanted to go out and smoke some bong but ended up unintentionally killing her sister. In a catatonic state, Peter drives home and goes to his bed, waking up to the sound of his mother screaming when she was welcomed with Charlie's decapitated head being run over by ants on the driveway. And for the first time, Annie breaks down. This time, it feels like things are different. The family feels fragmented and we get to see the cracks in the family's relationship. Annie tries again to go to the grief support group only to change her mind midway. As she is about to go back home, she is stopped by one of the attendees named Joan, who gives Annie her number in any case she needed to talk. A good Samaritan given Annie's situation. Through her grief, Annie befriends Joan and visits her house, becoming friends. As Annie enters Joan's apartment, she notices a similar doormat as her mom's, but nonchalantly brushes this off. But this already gives us, viewers, a sign that something is not right. Things go into a calm until Joan later on coincidentally meets Annie outside the store and seeds the idea of doing a seance to talk with her dead daughter Charlie. Annie initially rebuffs the idea, but is later tempted with her desperation and grief. As with Joan's instructions, just light the candle, say these words, and bring an item Charlie owns that you can use to communicate with her. Annie unknowingly starts a ritual that is definitely more than just about talking with her daughter Charlie. Upon her insistence and the understanding of her husband, who is now skeptical of her mental state, and Peter, they go through the seance where they all feel a spiritual force. Things get really scary, and Steve puts a stop to this and throws water on Annie, who started getting possessed to bring her back to her senses. Ever since the seance, stranger things have begun to happen. Annie starts sleepwalking again, while Peter continuously hallucinates, clearly shaken and feeling guilty about the death of Charlie. One night, Peter dreams about being choked, where he wakes up to Annie sleepwalking to his room. This on top of the scene where Annie does a miniature with a beheaded Peter lying on his bed calls for us to assume the same thing Peter is thinking. Her mom is trying to kill him. This puts further strain on her relationship with her son, and putting this on top of her already tense relationship with her husband resulted to Annie feeling overwhelmed and out of control. This makes her decide to put a stop to this. Enough is enough. She brings in Charlie's notebook that she used for the seance and throws it to the fire. But as the book burns, Annie also started burning, forcing her to take the book out of the fire. And like what all of us will most likely do, we go back to our friend who talked us into doing the seance that started all of this. Annie immediately goes to Joan's apartment, banging the door, asking for help on how to stop the strange things that are happening ever since the seance, only for Joan's door to be left unanswered. The camera shifts inside Joan's apartment, where we see the same symbol we saw on the post that killed Charlie, and a picture of Peter on the table. Clearly, Joan is not the good Samaritan we thought she was. Annie, now piecing things together, went back home to rummage through her mother's old things and figure out what the hell is going on, where she and we find the following things. First, she sees the same doormat embroidery as Joan's, revealing to us that Ellen and Joan are linked in some way. Second, Annie reads about King Paimon, of how a ritual is necessary to invoke him and his preference of a male host to possess, and the page that says, "Riches to the conjurer," implying a reward to the one who summons this demon. Third, she finds an old photo album and finally figures out that her mother and Joan are friends that belong to the same cult. Lastly, she finds a picture of her family being worshipped by a group we assume to be Ellen's cult. It is as if their whole family is being offered as sacrificial lambs. And to even deepen her search, Annie goes to their house attic where she finds her mother's dead body. As if things could not get any worse, the film turns to Peter, who continuously hallucinates and suddenly bangs his head on his school desk, breaking his nose. He is brought home by Steve, who is greeted by a frantic Annie, who tries to convince him of all the creepy things that are going on. She pleads him to go up the attic to find her mom, only for Steve to accuse her of digging her out of the grave during all those nights she was going to the movies. She begs for Steve to believe her, asking his help to burn Charlie's book, even if it means she would burn and die. Steve refuses to believe her, thinking she's crazy, and so in an act of self-sacrifice to protect her family, Annie burns the book, anticipating to burn herself. To her surprise, Steve is the one who burns instead and dies. And this is where Hereditary flexes its horror muscle as we see Annie fall victim to her own actions. The people she loves doubt her good intentions, her actions are being misinterpreted, and is being thought to have the very same illness her family has been riddled with. And more than just her family, Hereditary takes us, the audience, to believe that she herself has gone crazy. The scene then cuts to Peter waking up with a broken nose, walking downstairs to find his father burnt dead. He is later chased down by a possessed Annie, leading him up to the attic where he finds his picture, the very same one we found in Joan's apartment, in the middle of a circle of burning candles. And as if this is not enough, Peter turns only to find Annie, possessed, floating in the ceiling, decapitating her head with the piano string. In his shock, Peter jumps out of the attic window where King Paimon finally possesses him, signaling the completion of the ritual. Peter, now Paimon, walks to the treehouse Charlie frequents back when she was still alive, and finds naked worshippers bowing to Charlie's head placed on top of a mannequin. He is then greeted by Joan, who initially calls him Charlie, with her last words being, "You are now Paimon." She then transfers the crown from Charlie's decapitated head to Peter, with the worshippers now bowing to him. The ending scene reveals to us that Charlie has actually been possessed by Paimon all along, that all the events leading to her death has all been planned unknowingly by the cult Ellen belongs to, the very same people who must have been the attendees to her funeral. The film takes us through an unraveling, showing that Annie and her family had no concept of choice from the very start. They were offered by Ellen to King Paimon from the very beginning, with her death as the catalyst for the ritual to take place. As Ari Arister has described it, the film is about a long-lived possession ritual that is seen from the perspective of the sacrificial lambs. This movie is disturbing as Annie's family is constantly being controlled over by outside forces without their knowledge. As Peter's teacher asks his students in one of the scenes, what is more tragic, the concept of having a choice or no choice? In this case, Hereditary's tragedy is knowing their fates are sealed, and there is nothing that they can do about it. Contrary to mainstream opinion, Hereditary is a must-watch for me. More than jump scares, Hereditary shares with us the horror of a sealed fate, where we end up being victims by our actions regardless of what we do. It has a story about a family dealing with a tragedy with very good acting, especially from Toni Collette, who plays Annie. And lastly, it's a cult horror movie with disturbing rituals that is in some way based on reality. I hope you guys had fun with this review. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about films, consider liking this video and subscribe for more content. This is Kelsey, and looking forward to seeing you in the next one.